Hello and welcome to episode 15 of the Retro Game Gauntlet Reviewcast. I'm your host Torsvik, and this week I played Dynowarz, The Destruction of Spondylus, for the NES, which was developed by the Advanced Communication Company. Heard of them? I haven't. They apparently worked on the Fourth East game and a cult game called Cyber Knight. My rationale for giving Cyber Knight the cult label is based around the fact that it's an RPG with a fan translation. Can't speak for the quality or completeness of this translation, but translations take a lot of effort, so there's probably some demand for this game beyond my awareness. Anyway, Dynowarz, The Destruction of Spondylus is an action game broken into two parts. The first parts are the Dr. Proteus sections. As Dr. Proteus, you must platform your way to the virus-infected life support supercomputer and destroy it. After you succeed at completing your mission, you will have to backtrack to the beginning of the dungeon, where you then begin to pilot the Cybersaurus. While piloting the Cybersaurus, the game becomes more combat-oriented. You will fight your way through an army of robosaurs to the next life support supercomputer, where you then will repeat the cycle. There's 7 levels and, well, they're honestly indistinguishable for the most part. And that's about it for the summary. I won't lie, I'm a bit underwhelmed. It may be in part that I'm coming from the Sega Saturn, PlayStation, and N64, but this game is painfully underwhelming. And with that teaser, we can move into the breakdown. Dynowarz, The Destruction of Spondylus. When you're not falling in a pit and resetting to the title screen, you will be alternating between the Dr. Proteus sections and Cybersaurus sections. Controls on both modes are the same. A jumps and B fires your weapons. The only thing that stands out is that while piloting the Cybersaurus, you can press select to launch a screen clear from orbit once per stage. The game opens with a Dr. Proteus section, so we'll open there. As Dr. Proteus, you will need to move from the left to the right, transitioning from room to room. These rooms will be filled with flying enemies and turrets to stop you. Eventually, you will make your way to the life support supercomputer. I would accuse the life support supercomputer of being a Mother Brain knockoff, which in many ways it is, but the biotech aesthetic was popular at the time. Just see Contra, Kabuki Quantum Fighter, and Ninja Gaiden. After unloading into the life support supercomputer, you will then have to return the way you came and hop back aboard the Cybersaurus. Once piloting the Cybersaurus, the game becomes much more of an action game than a platformer. The levels are not room-based as with Dr. Proteus, and are instead wide scrolling levels. You will begin pushing the line against the robosaurs and leaping across tiny gaps. By default, the Cybersaurus can only punch, but you will find pickup upgrades along the way. We got 4 weapons to choose from. The Launch Fist, which throws out a fist as a boomerang. Fireball launches a projectile. The Laser fires a laser, another projectile. Finally, the Bomb lobs grenades forward. Furthermore, if you pick up the same weapon as the one you have equipped, it will level up your current weapon. The Launch Fist increases its speed and distance, the Fireball splits up to 3, the Laser gets a pair of fireballs, and the Bomb gets bigger and you can fire them behind you. At the end of the level, you'll have to fight a boss, usually a pre-existing Robosaur, but with additional health. After beating the boss, Dr. Proteus will exit the Cybersaurus and storm the next life support supercomputer bunker. There are also energy and barrier pickups. These appear in both the Cybersaurus and Dr. Proteus sections. The energy refills your health, and the barrier gives you a second health bar. And that's it. Loop between Dr. Proteus and Cybersaurus 7 times and you're finished. You start with a Dr. Proteus section, so he gets 8 levels technically, but besides that, most of the levels are nondescript, so there's not much actually to say about them. So, let's move over to the analysis. I won't be able to analyze this game without immediately showing my hand, so I'll start by saying, this game is an absolute mess. This game has very little going on, and almost every element is riddled with problems. We'll start from the top with the controls. Movement, especially jumping, is so stiff it makes Castlevania feel like Sonic Adventure. Even early in the game, many of the jumps are precise. You'll be expected to edge jump with stiff and non-responsive controls. This becomes a major pain in the late Dr. Proteus sections. The platforms are unforgiving, and falling into a pit forces you to the title screen to continue. Luckily, you do have unlimited continues. If this wasn't the case, I don't think I could have finished this game, at least not with my sanity intact. I'll take a short aside right now on collision boxes. In non-multiplayer games, always favor the player. This is why in many games you can approach comically close to the edge. When the player falls, it should be completely clear that it was due to a failure on the part of the player. Giving the player a wide berth of error will communicate that to the player. If you design more vague collision, such as having a single point in between the player's feet required for collision with platforms, players will commonly respond to the game as being cheap, as they watch a quarter of their character clip through the platform. This rule of course varies based on the game. Super Mario 64, for example, does have a single point of collision between Mario's feet, but 3D is a completely different beast. The fast and dirty equivalent is to use shadows, but I won't get too distracted here. Collision that doesn't favor the player is like playing chess with someone, but even though you're completely playing by the rules, you only move while your opponent isn't looking. You're not cheating, but you do build an air of distrust. Mind that this is independent from difficulty. You can still favor the player but have very difficult jumps, with only a few frames as a reaction window. The point of this is just making the failure clear to the player and why they failed. You need to be completely obvious that they missed their jump and that they didn't, say, fall through the platform. Especially some games, if you land on a platform on frames where the platform is going up, sometimes you can pop through it. With that aside done, let's move on to level design. I've not talked much about level design in most of my reviews, but this one is impressive for its lack of variety. The Cybersaurus levels are almost completely flat with very few platforms. This is alright though, it does fit the giant mech aesthetic. The real problem is the Dr. Proteus levels. Dr. Proteus' stages are broken into rooms, of which there's only about 5 or so variants. Even watching the montage go by, you're probably seeing a lot of the Dr. Proteus sections being borderline identical. Now, it's not a strange tactic to save memory by reusing rooms. Legend of Zelda reuses many rooms, and even Super Mario Bros. Will reuse block patterns, but in Dynowarz, the Destruction of Spondylus, half of the game is going to be the same 5 rooms, and the other half is going to be flat land. I'll put a little bit of pressure right here for the flat land. If you want it to be more combat-oriented, so this will be a hypothetical if you were making a big mech game. There's games like this and Godzilla-type games where mostly big flat terrain where you then fight with other things. You need a more varied combat design than this game provides, even if it's just you have a reflect ability or a shield or a block. Doesn't need to be quite as dynamic as, say, Zelda 2, but you should have slightly more dynamic combat other than shoot from as far away as you can and footsie out your opponent. Next up is items. For the most part, items are fine. The Rocket Punch and Bomb could benefit from a slight damage buff or other beneficial change, but other than that, the actual item uses are fine. But there are still 2 problems with the items. First is the consecutive collection mechanic. The mechanic itself, as a concept, is fine. It's a staple of classic shmups. The problem is that the items have a big collision box, and jumping is stiff as mentioned before, so oftentimes, avoiding unwanted items is a chore at best, and impossible a majority of the time. Second point, the power-up sprites are a blurry, unrecognizable mess. After a bit, you can figure out the mess of shapes, but we don't need realistic depictions of these weapons. The developers need to communicate clearly to the player what is on the screen. Just do what most classic shmups do. Include a little letter that either flashes or is on a colored background on your 8-bit pixelated mess. Time for the positives. Right, so that's it for the positives. Let's grade this game. So, we have here a game with no real redeemable qualities. It's subpar, but playable, which sets most games up for a 2. However, let's take a look at the release date. Many early games on the NES had these or similar flaws, but this game was released in 1990. This is the year where F-Zero and Super Mario World was released, but that's an unfair comparison for being on superior hardware. But how about Crystallis, that was released the same year? Even the cheap port Kid Nicky, which is only marginally better and at least twice as interesting, was released 3 years earlier. If I had to guess, I think that the producer, Bandai, saw the autumn years of the NES coming in They had this shelved idea gathering dust, so they shoveled it out with as little work as possible. It's possible that they even copywritten the name before even producing it, and it was sitting there, maybe about to be dropped, and they just said, release this, make money on it, and we can all go home. If this game was released in 1986, putting it before Castlevania, I may have been more lenient, but it wasn't, so I won't. This level of quality is unacceptable this late into early modern gaming. I'm nailing this guy with a 1 on 5. Anyway, I'll close this out with a shill. Go ahead and smash that approve button and thumb vote this video likewise. I post a poll every weekend to decide what game I'll play next on my Twitter. If you would like to see me playing these Gauntlet games live, you can find me on Twitch. Links for all this stuff will be in the description. Intro and outro is Sea Breeze by Culture.